Assalamu alaikum students. Today our topic of discussion is nervous regulation of the circulation. It is the start of fifth chapter of circulation from Guyton. And in the nervous regulation, you know that autonomic nervous system has the main control on circulation. And the autonomic nervous system consists of two parts: sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So firstly, we will discuss sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic vasomotor nerve fibers leave the spinal cord through all the thoracic spinal nerves and through the first 1 to 2 lumbar spinal nerves. So this is the extent of sympathetic nervous system from T1 to L1 or L2. They then pass immediately into a sympathetic chain, one of which lies on each side of the vertebral column. You can see here. This is the vertebral column, and these are the sympathetic chains on the two sides of vertebral column. Okay, next they pass by two routes to the circulation. Either the sympathetic nerve fibers pass to internal viscera and the heart, and the other option and the other route is to the peripheral areas, vasculature of peripheral areas, for example skeletal muscles. So sympathetic nervous system has two routes, one towards viscera and other towards the peripheral areas. Okay. Sympathetic innervation of the blood vessels. Sympathetic nerve fibers are distributed to the blood vessel in most tissues, all the vessels except the capillaries, pericapillary sphincters, and metarterioles. So these are the few exceptions where sympathetic nerve supply cannot reach or cannot supply, which are capillaries, precapillary sphincters, and metarterioles. You can see here. After arterioles, there is metarteriole and then capillaries, where there is no sympathetic stimulation. The innervation of small arteries and arterioles allows sympathetic stimulation to increase resistance to blood flow and thereby to decrease rate of blood flow through the vessels. When there is a stimulation of sympathetic nervous system, there is vasoconstriction of the arteries and arterioles. So this vasoconstriction increases the resistance to blood flow, thus decreases the rate of blood flow to the tissues. And the innervation of large vessels, particularly of the veins, make it possible for sympathetic stimulation to decrease the volume of these vessels, thus push blood into the heart. So the impact of sympathetic stimulation on veins is vasoconstriction. So when the vasoconstriction of veins occur, the blood is pushed towards the heart. The venous return increases. You have also studied in the chapter of venous return, the impact of sympathetic stimulation on venous return. Sympathetic nerve fibers to the heart. Mainly the sympathetic nerve fibers to the heart increases the heart rate and enhancing the strength and volume of pumping. Parasympathetic control of heart function. Parasympathetic control mainly controls the gastrointestinal tract, where it has excitatory function, because the parasympathetic system on other viscera or on other systems have inhibitory effect. But in gastrointestinal tract, this is the exception, where the parasympathetic system has excitatory effect while the sympathetic system has inhibitory effect. You know that sympathetic system is a flight and fight, is involved in fight and flight reaction. So parasympathetic is activatory while parasympathetic is inhibitory. But in gastrointestinal tract, parasympathetic is activatory, excitatory, while sympathetic is inhibitory. It plays only a minor role in the regulation of circulation, and the parasympathetic nerve fibers to the heart in the vagus nerve from the brain medulla directly to the heart. And parasympathetic stimulation causes a marked decrease in heart rate and slight decrease in heart muscle contractility. So it has opposite effects to sympathetic stimulation. It decreases the heart rate and decreases the force of contraction. You can see here the parasympathetic fibers in red dotted line from Vasomotor Center to the heart through vagus nerve. This is your parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, and the vasomotor center. Vasomotor center has three parts: vasoconstrictor, vasodilator, and sensory parts. So first, the signals are received by a sensory part. So actually, when, for example, there is a vasoconstriction in the blood vessel, this is the stimulus. This stimulus is received by baroreceptors present on the walls of blood vessel. So the vasoconstrictor signals, the increase in pressure signals, are received by, are sensed by the baroreceptors present on the blood vessel wall. And from these baroreceptors, the sensory nerve fibers take the signals to the vasomotor center in the brain, in the medulla and pons. Vasomotor center is present in the medulla and pons. So the signals are carried from blood vessels to vasomotor center through sensory nerve, and firstly received by sensory part of the vasomotor center, and then the vasomotor center send signals to vasoconstrictor or vasodilator area depending upon the signals. So if the signals received by sensory part are vasoconstrictor, are vasoconstrictor signals, so what will happen? The vasoconstrictor area will be off while vasodilator area will on, and the vasodilator signals are moved from vasomotor center to the blood vessels through sympathetic nervous system. So the vasodilation will occur. So firstly, vasoconstriction occurs, and at the end, in the effector area, the vasodilation will occur. So if in the sensory area vasodilation is present, then in the effector area vasoconstriction will occur. So it is vice versa. You can see here the vasomotor center, pons and medulla. And in the center dotted line, vasodilator fibers, and the regular lines are the vasoconstrictor fibers. Okay. Continuous partial constriction of blood vessels is normally caused by sympathetic vasoconstrictor tone. Under normal condition, the vasoconstrictor area of the vasomotor center transmits signals continuously to the sympathetic vasoconstrictor nerve fibers over the entire body, causing continuous slow firing of these fibers at a rate of about 1/2 to 2 impulses per second. So there is continuous firing of signals from the vasoconstrictor area to all the blood vessels of the body. So they remain in the partial state of contraction. So that the partial state of contraction is called tone. So in case of vessels, it is called vasomotor tone or sympathetic vasoconstrictor tone. So the vessels remain partially constricted all the time. They don't become flaccid. Control of heart activity by vasomotor center. At the same time that the vasomotor center is controlling the amount of vascular constriction, it also controls the heart activity. Lateral portion of vasomotor center has excitatory effect on the heart. It increases the heart rate and heart contractility, while medial portion of dorsal motor nuclei of the vagus nerve, which then transmit parasympathetic impulses through the vagus nerve to the heart to decrease heart rate and heart contractility. So these two conditions are vice versa. Lateral portion is excitatory while medial portion is inhibitory. Control of vasomotor center by higher nervous system. The neurons in the more lateral and superior portion of the reticular substance causes excitation, where the more medial and inferior portion causes inhibition. So reticular substance is the part of higher brain center. It controls the vasomotor center. while posterolateral portion of hypothalamus causes mainly excitation, whereas anterior portion causes mild excitation or inhibition. And the stimulation of motor cortex, for instance, excites the vasomotor center because of impulses transmitted downward into the hypothalamus and then to the vasomotor center. So hypothalamus is also a part of higher center. Its posterolateral portion excites the vasomotor center, while its anterior portion mildly excite or inhibit the vasomotor center. And adrenal medulla and their relation to the sympathetic vasoconstrictor system. Sympathetic impulses are transmitted to the adrenal medulla at the same time that they are transmitted to the blood vessels. So on one side, sympathetic impulses are transmitted to the blood vessels, and on the other hand, at the same time, sympathetic impulses are also transmitted to the adrenal medulla. They cause the medulla to secrete both epinephrine and norepinephrine into the circulating blood. These two hormones are carried in the bloodstream to all parts of the body where they act directly on the blood vessels, usually to cause vasoconstriction. But in occasional tissues, epinephrine causes vasodilation. The example of vasodilation will occur in GIT, gastrointestinal tract. So the main effect is vasoconstriction. Emotional fainting or vasovagal syncope. A particularly interesting vasodilator reaction occurs in people who experience intense emotional disturbances that cause fainting. So intense emotional disturbances may cause vasodilatory reactions and cause fainting. In this case, the muscle vasodilator system became activated, and at the same time, the vagal cardioinhibitory center transmits strong signals to the heart to slow the heart rate markedly. So the vasodilator system in the muscles, as well as the cardioinhibitory center of vagal nerve, transmit signals to the heart. You have studied in the previous slides the cardioinhibitory fibers, vagus nerve, red. So these also play a role in vasovagal syncope. The arterial pressure falls rapidly, which reduces blood flow to the brain and causes the person to lose consciousness. So the arterial pressure falls down and thus reduces the blood flow to the brain, which causes loss of consciousness. This overall effect is called vasovagal syncope. So the brain undergoes ischemia. Emotional fainting begins with disturbing thoughts in the cerebral cortex. The pathway probably then goes to the vasodilatory center of the anterior hypothalamus, next to vagal center of the medulla, to the heart through the vagus nerve, and also through the spinal cord to the sympathetic vasodilator nerve fibers of the muscle. So this is the pathway. Firstly, the cerebral cortex. Signals come from cerebral cortex, then to anterior hypothalamus, and then to vagal center of the medulla, and then to heart. And also sympathetic vasodilator fibers to muscles. So this is the pathway of vasovagal syncope, fainting, emotional fainting. Role of nervous system in rapid control of arterial pressure. 3 major changes occur simultaneously, each of which help to increase arterial pressure. So there are 3 mainly changes which increase the arterial pressure. Almost all the arterioles of the systemic circulation are constricted. This greatly increases the total peripheral resistance and thereby increases the arterial pressure. So firstly, all the systemic circulation, all the arterioles of systemic circulation are constricted. The veins especially are strongly constricted. So arterioles are constricted and then veins are constricted. This is the impact of nervous system on the arterial pressure. The heart, the other main significant contributor of blood pressure is heart. The heart itself is directly stimulated by the autonomic nervous system, further enhancing cardiac pumping, sometimes increases to as great as 3 times normal. So main 3 effects, one is on arterioles, other is on veins, and third is on heart. And all the effects are stimulatory for increase in blood pressure. And rapidity of nervous control of arterial pressure, and especially important characteristic of nervous control of arterial pressure is its rapidity of response, beginning within seconds, often increasing the pressure to 2 times normal within 5 to 10 seconds. So the time is very short, very rapid. Conversely, sudden inhibition of nervous cardiovascular stimulation can decrease the arterial pressure to as little as 1/2 the normal within 10 to 40 seconds. So this is also very rapid. So inhibition is very rapid and excitation is also very rapid. Excitation is more rapid than inhibition. Therefore, nervous control of arterial pressure is by far the most rapid of all our mechanisms for pressure control. So this nervous control is fastest among all the mechanisms for pressure control. The other mechanisms you will study in the next lectures, which are the other mechanisms for blood pressure control. Okay, this is today's lecture on nervous control of circulation. Okay.